On the news, in politics, in the workplace, in your daily life. People making absurd decisions, believing obvious lies, following the crowd without a second thought. But what if this isn't just human nature? What if stupidity isn't random but something far more insidious? What if it's being cultivated, deliberately reinforced, because a stupid population is easier to control? German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer understood this better than anyone. Stupidity, he argued, isn't just an intellectual failure, but a social force, one that thrives under power, obedience, and the illusion of knowledge. If you've ever wondered why so many people around you seem blind to reality, why society repeats the same mistakes, and why intelligent people fall for the dumbest ideas, it's because stupidity doesn't just exist. It spreads. And the scariest part? You might not be as immune to it as you think. Stupidity isn't just about lacking intelligence. It isn't just ignorance or being uninformed. It's something deeper, something far more dangerous. Stupidity is a condition, one that takes root in individuals but thrives in groups. It spreads like a virus, feeding off conformity, obedience, and the unwillingness to question. It's not just that people don't know, it's that they refuse to know. And that is what makes stupidity so powerful. Dietrich Bonhoeffer saw this firsthand. He realized that the greatest threat to society wasn't evil men in dark rooms plotting destruction. It was ordinary people, following orders, embracing propaganda, and refusing to think for themselves. They weren't driven by cruelty, but by thoughtlessness. They were not victims of deception. They were active participants in it. Because stupidity, when fully formed, isn't just an absence of knowledge, it's an active resistance to it. This is why stupidity flourishes in groups. The moment people surrender independent thought to the collective, they stop questioning, they stop analyzing, they stop thinking altogether. They rely on others to do it for them, and if those others are just as blind, stupidity multiplies. It creates a false sense of security, the idea that if everyone believes something, it must be true. And that is how entire societies fall into madness. Stupidity, Bonhoeffer argued, isn't an individual failing, it's a social force. It grows in the spaces where questioning is discouraged, where obedience is rewarded, and where reality is dictated by the powerful rather than discovered through independent thought. In these environments, people stop thinking because thinking becomes dangerous. It isolates them. It makes them a target. And so, they choose the easier path, the path of blind acceptance. This is why stupidity isn't the same as ignorance. Ignorance is a lack of knowledge. Stupidity is the refusal to engage with it. An ignorant person can learn, but a stupid person has closed the door to learning. They hold on to their beliefs not because they are true, but because they are comfortable. They reject opposing views, not because they've examined them and found them lacking, but because considering them would require effort they are unwilling to make. And yet, the biggest mistake you can make is assuming that stupidity only infects the uneducated. Intelligence does not make you immune to stupidity. In fact, intelligence can make stupidity even more dangerous. An intelligent person who has been captured by stupidity will use their intellect not to seek truth, but to defend their own delusions. They will rationalize nonsense, argue against reality, and weaponize their knowledge to protect the system that has programmed them. The smarter they are, the better they become at lying to themselves. This is why entire institutions can be filled with educated, credentialed individuals making obviously stupid decisions. It's why governments, corporations, and media outlets can be run by people with the best degrees, yet consistently push policies, narratives, and ideas that defy basic logic. They are not ignorant. They are stupid, because they have surrendered critical thought in favor of ideological loyalty. And the worst part? Stupidity is self-reinforcing. The more it spreads, the harder it becomes to escape. The herd grows larger, the pressure to conform intensifies, and soon, even those who see through the illusion are forced to play along. Some do it out of fear, some do it out of exhaustion, and some simply convince themselves that resistance is futile. But there are things we cannot say here. Some truths are too controversial, too disruptive, too dangerous to share on this platform. Stupidity doesn't just thrive in groups, it thrives under power. The more powerful a person or institution becomes, the more insulated they are from criticism, and the more detached they become from reality. Power breeds arrogance, and arrogance breeds stupidity. This is one of Bonhoeffer's most chilling insights. Power doesn't just corrupt, it makes people stupid, not because they lose intelligence, but because they stop engaging with truth. They no longer have to. When someone rises to power, they surround themselves with people who tell them what they want to hear. They become shielded from the consequences of their decisions, and over time, they develop a dangerous kind of intellectual laziness. They don't question themselves because no one else is allowed to question them. They are no longer required to think critically, and so they don't. They operate in a bubble where their ideas, no matter how absurd, are treated as wisdom simply because they came from someone in authority. History is filled with examples of leaders, rulers, and executives who became trapped in their own stupidity. Look at the dictators who led their countries into ruin, convinced of their own brilliance. Look at the politicians who refused to acknowledge reality because doing so would mean admitting they were wrong. Look at the CEOs who destroy their own companies, blinded by arrogance and surrounded by people too afraid to tell them the truth. These are not rare cases. This is how power works. The more authority someone has, the less resistance they face, and the more detached from reality they become. But stupidity under power isn't just a personal failure. It has consequences for everyone. Because when leaders become stupid, they make stupid decisions. And when institutions are built on stupidity, they enforce stupid policies. This is how entire governments, corporations, and movements can spiral into disaster, convinced they are on the right path even as everything falls apart around them. It's not just that they don't see the warning signs, it's that they are incapable of seeing them. Stupidity, when combined with power, becomes dangerously self-reinforcing. Those in power attract followers who do not challenge them, but instead echo their stupidity. These followers then rise into positions of influence themselves, creating a system where intelligence is actively pushed out. The smartest people leave, the obedient ones remain, and the system becomes dumber with each generation. This is how stupidity wins, not through force, but through slow, methodical self-replication. This is why history repeats itself, why the same mistakes are made over and over again, because stupidity doesn't just survive, it evolves. It finds new ways to infect power structures, to insulate itself, to protect itself from extinction. And every time society fails to recognize this pattern, it falls into the same trap once again. But here's the truly terrifying part. Stupidity is not just tolerated in power, it is often rewarded. People in power do not want critical thinkers. They do not want individuals who question, analyze, and challenge. They want obedience. They want people who will follow orders, who will execute plans without hesitation, who will do as they are told. And so, stupidity is not just allowed in high places. It is cultivated there. It is the perfect tool for control. Because a stupid population is easy to rule. A stupid workforce is easy to exploit. A stupid society is easy to manipulate. Stupidity is not just a flaw in the system. It is the foundation of the system. It is what allows power to operate without resistance, without challenge, without consequence. This is why stupidity will always be more dangerous than evil. An evil person can be stopped, confronted, exposed. But a stupid person fights to remain blind. A stupid person defends the system that enslaves them. A stupid person will cling to their illusions with such desperation that they will destroy themselves before admitting they were wrong. And when stupidity takes hold of power, it becomes nearly impossible to uproot, because power defends itself. It builds walls, creates propaganda, and eliminates dissent. It ensures that those who question are silenced, ridiculed, cast out, and those who comply, they are promoted, they are rewarded, they are given the illusion of importance, while in reality, they are nothing more than tools. Bonhoeffer understood this better than most. He saw firsthand how an entire country could fall into stupidity, how an entire generation could be consumed by blind obedience. how people could be turned into instruments of destruction without ever realizing what they had become. He watched as friends, neighbors, and intellectuals surrendered to stupidity, not because they were unintelligent, but because it was easier. Because thinking, questioning, and resisting took more effort than simply going along with the crowd. And this is where the greatest danger lies. Because stupidity is comfortable. It is warm, safe, and familiar. It requires nothing from you, no effort, no risk, no uncertainty. It allows you to hand over responsibility for your own thinking to someone else, to trust that those in power will do what is best, to believe that everything is as it should be. And if that doesn't terrify you, it should. The most terrifying thing about stupidity is not that it exists, but that it enables evil. People imagine that history's greatest atrocities were committed by monsters, cruel, sadistic individuals who relished in their own darkness. But the truth is far more unsettling. Most of the people who carried out history's worst crimes weren't driven by malice. They weren't even particularly intelligent. They were ordinary, thoughtless. They followed orders. They obeyed. And that is the true danger of stupidity. Evil requires complicity. It requires people who will do what they are told, who will enforce rules they don't understand, who will defend systems they never question. It requires a population that does not think. And that is exactly what stupidity provides. It creates an army of people who are incapable of resisting evil, not because they agree with it, but because they do not recognize it. They do not see the consequences of their actions. They do not question authority. They do not think beyond the immediate task in front of them. They do not look deeper, because stupidity has stripped them of the ability to do so. This is why atrocities are often carried out by the most unremarkable people. The employees who process the orders, the soldiers who carry them out, the politicians who sign the papers, the citizens who look the other way. They do not act with cruelty. They act without thinking at all. And that is what makes them so dangerous. Stupidity is the perfect tool for oppression because it does not require force. People who refuse to think will accept anything. They will march to war without asking why. They will obey laws that strip them of their own freedoms. They will enforce rules that harm themselves and their neighbors, all because it is easier to obey than to question. History has already shown us how this works. People are becoming more obedient, more willing to accept absurdities, more afraid of questioning authority. The truth is being buried under waves of misinformation, outrage, and distraction. And stupidity is spreading, not because people are dumb, but because they have been trained to stop thinking. This is the true horror of stupidity. It does not just make individuals weak, it makes societies weak. It allows the worst kinds of people to rise to power, the worst kinds of ideas to spread, the worst kinds of suffering to become normalized. And it does all of this without resistance, because those who should fight back are too blind to see the need. But here is the question. If history has shown us where this path leads, why do we keep following it? Why do people continue to surrender to stupidity, generation after generation? Why do they keep making the same mistakes, even when the evidence is right in front of them? Because stupidity is comfortable. It is easy. It protects people from the burden of responsibility. When you refuse to think, you do not have to question your role in the system. You do not have to face difficult truths. You do not have to make hard choices. You simply exist, moving through life without ever truly engaging with it. And that is why stupidity will always be the greatest enabler of evil, because it does not require anyone to act with cruelty. It only requires them to do nothing at all. Stupidity is not just a relic of history. It is alive, thriving, and more contagious than ever. In an age where information is everywhere, ignorance should be impossible. And yet stupidity is spreading faster than at any point in human history. People are not just uninformed. They are actively rejecting truth, clinging to comforting lies, and resisting anything that challenges their worldview. The question is, how did we get here? How did a world with unlimited access to knowledge create a population that is more divided, more irrational, and more controlled than ever before? The answer lies in the very systems that claim to keep us informed. Mass media, social media, and political institutions do not exist to educate. They exist to manipulate. And the easiest way to manipulate a population is not by keeping them ignorant, but by making them believe they are informed. Stupidity today is not about a lack of knowledge. It is about overexposure to misinformation, emotional manipulation, and ideological conformity. People feel like they know the truth, when in reality, they are simply repeating narratives they have been programmed to accept. Social media is the perfect tool for spreading stupidity. It turns complex issues into simplistic slogans, encourages knee-jerk reactions over deep thought, and rewards those who follow the herd. The algorithm doesn't prioritize truth. It prioritizes engagement. And what gets the most engagement? Outrage, tribalism, and blind loyalty to whatever ideology dominates the space. The internet should have made people more intelligent. Instead, it has turned stupidity into a performance, one that people eagerly participate in, desperate for validation from their chosen group. The structure of modern discourse makes independent thinking nearly impossible. It is not enough to disagree. You must choose a side. Every issue is reduced to a binary, left or right, good or evil, us or them. Nuance is erased, and with it, critical thought. If you question your own side, you are a traitor. If you acknowledge a valid point from the opposition, you are weak. And so, people do what is easiest. They stop questioning altogether. They absorb the beliefs of their tribe without scrutiny, repeat the talking points they have been given, and attack anyone who dares to think for themselves. And that is exactly how stupidity spreads. Not through lack of intelligence, but through a culture that punishes thinking and rewards blind obedience. Schools teach memorization instead of reasoning. News outlets simplify reality to fit ideological narratives. Politicians speak in slogans rather than substance. Every system in modern society is designed to create intellectually passive citizens, people who consume, obey, and conform without ever stopping to ask why. But it doesn't stop there. Stupidity is also enforced through fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of standing alone, fear of social rejection. People do not just adopt stupid beliefs. They cling to them out of self-preservation. Because questioning the dominant narrative is dangerous. It makes you a target. It isolates you. It forces you to confront uncomfortable truths that are easier to ignore. And so, most people take the easy path. They pretend to know things they haven't actually thought about. They echo opinions they've never examined. They embrace the safety of certainty, even if that certainty is built on lies. And this is exactly what those in power want. They do not need to silence people when they can simply overwhelm them with so much noise, so much confusion, so much emotional manipulation, that thinking becomes exhausting. The goal is not just to misinform. It is to make independent thought feel like an impossible task, to make people so mentally drained that they default to obedience. And once that happens, once people stop thinking for themselves, stupidity becomes self-sustaining. Because a stupid society does not require control. It controls itself. It polices its own members, enforces its own blind spots, and silences its own thinkers. Those who break from the herd are not stopped by the system. They are stopped by the people around them, by friends, by family, by co-workers who have become so invested in their illusions that they will attack anyone who threatens them. This is how stupidity spreads, not through oppression, but through voluntary self-censorship. And once a society reaches that point, once stupidity has become the norm, breaking free is nearly impossible. Because the moment you start thinking for yourself, the moment you step outside the illusion, you see the terrifying truth that most people will fight to remain blind. If stupidity spreads so easily, if it embeds itself so deeply in society, the question becomes, can it be stopped? Is there a way to break free from the grip of mass ignorance? Or are we doomed to repeat history, watching as people blindly march toward their own destruction? The truth is, resisting stupidity is not just possible, it is necessary, but it is not easy. Because stupidity is not just about lack of knowledge, it is about a refusal to question, a rejection of critical thought, and an instinct to conform. and that makes it one of the hardest things to fight. The first and most important step in resisting stupidity is recognizing it in yourself. No one is immune. No matter how intelligent, how educated, how self-aware you believe yourself to be, you are still vulnerable. Because stupidity is not just about intelligence. It is about intellectual laziness. It is about the moments where you accept something without questioning it, where you repeat a belief without truly understanding it, where you refuse to engage with ideas that make you uncomfortable. And if you cannot see those moments in yourself, then you are already trapped. The greatest mistake people make is believing that stupidity is something that only exists in others, that it is something that happens to the uneducated, the gullible, the uninformed. But the real danger of stupidity is that it hides in plain sight, often disguising itself as confidence, certainty, even intelligence. People who believe they are too smart to be fooled are often the easiest to manipulate, because they never stop to question whether they have already been caught. They assume that their beliefs are correct because they feel correct, and that is exactly how stupidity takes hold. The only way to resist is through radical self-examination. You must question everything, especially the things you are most certain about, because certainty is the greatest trap of all. The moment you stop questioning, the moment you decide that you have everything figured out, is the moment you stop thinking. And that is exactly what stupidity wants. It thrives in the spaces where people feel smart without actually being smart. But questioning is not enough, because the world is full of distractions, full of noise designed to keep you from thinking deeply. Every system, every institution, every media platform is built to bombard you with information, opinions, arguments, narratives, all designed to overwhelm, exhaust, and break you down until you stop thinking altogether, until you default to the easiest, most comforting belief. This is why resisting stupidity requires more than just skepticism. It requires discipline. You must take control of your own mind. You must choose what you engage with. You must step outside the noise, carve out space for deep thought, and fight against the pull of mental passivity. And once you begin to see clearly, once you recognize how stupidity spreads and how it operates, you will begin to notice something even more disturbing. You will see that stupidity is not just encouraged in society, it is enforced. People do not want you to question. They do not want you to challenge their beliefs, to disrupt the comfortable illusions they have built for themselves. And when you do, they will resist you. They will mock you, attack you, push you back into line. Not because they hate you, but because you represent a threat to their certainty, to their worldview, to the comforting ignorance they have chosen. This is why intelligence is often punished, why the greatest thinkers throughout history were ridiculed, silenced, or destroyed. Because stupidity is not just a force, it is a defense mechanism. It does not just spread, it protects itself. It seeks to eliminate anything that threatens its existence. And if you are going to resist it, you must be prepared for that fight. You must be prepared to stand alone. But here is the truth. The alternative is worse. To surrender to stupidity is to surrender your mind, your autonomy, your ability to engage with reality. It is to allow yourself to be manipulated, controlled, and used by forces that do not have your best interests at heart. It is to become just another piece in a machine that does not care about you. And once you see that, once you understand the true cost of stupidity, you will realize that fighting back is the only option. Because intelligence is not just a gift, it is a responsibility. And the moment you stop thinking, the moment you allow yourself to be swept along by the tide of mass ignorance, you become part of the problem. You become the very thing you once swore to resist. And that is why, no matter how difficult, no matter how isolating, you must never stop questioning. Because the world does not need more people who are certain. It needs more people who are willing to think. Stupidity is not just a personal failing, and it is not just a social phenomenon. It is a system, a carefully maintained structure that rewards blind obedience and punishes independent thought. It is embedded in education, politics, entertainment, and even everyday conversations. The world does not discourage stupidity. It cultivates it. And if you want to fight back, you have to understand exactly how deep the roots of this system go. From the moment you are born, you are trained to comply. Schools do not teach you how to think. They teach you what to think. They condition you to accept authority without question, to memorize instead of analyze, to follow rules without ever considering whether those rules make sense. Ask too many questions, and you are disruptive. Challenge the curriculum, and you are difficult. The most obedient students are rewarded, while the most independent thinkers are labeled as problems. By the time you leave the system, you are not just ignorant. You are afraid to question, and that is exactly the point. The same system continues into adulthood. Most workplaces do not value intelligence. They value compliance. You are expected to perform a role, to follow the script, to contribute just enough but never too much. If you challenge authority, if you ask why things are done the way they are, you become a risk. You are reminded, explicitly or subtly, that thinking too much is dangerous. The people who rise in these environments are not the smartest or the most capable. They are the ones who learned how to play along, the ones who never disrupt the system, the ones who follow orders, no matter how absurd. And then there is the media. News, entertainment, social platforms, all of them are designed to shape the way you think, or more accurately, to ensure that you do not think at all. Headlines are written not to inform you, but to provoke emotional reactions. Stories are crafted not to make you understand the world, but to reinforce your existing beliefs. The goal is not to educate, it is to condition, to make you react predictably, to keep you locked into simplistic narratives where there is no room for complexity, no space for doubt, no time to stop and reflect. Because a thinking population is dangerous. A thinking population asks questions. A thinking population does not blindly consume, does not blindly obey, does not blindly follow orders. And so, stupidity is not just tolerated in this system, it is required. A truly intelligent, critically thinking society would collapse it overnight. It would see through the illusions, reject the lies, and demand something better. That is why intelligence is under attack. That is why those who question are ridiculed, censored, and pushed to the margins. Not because they are wrong, but because they are inconvenient. So how do you fight back? First, you have to recognize that this system does not just exist out there. It exists in you. The conditioning runs deep. You have been trained to accept, to obey, to dismiss uncomfortable ideas before you even process them. You have been trained to self-censor, to avoid thinking too deeply because it is exhausting, because it isolates you, because it makes your life harder. And the first step to resisting the system is breaking that pattern within yourself. You must learn to detach. Detach from the narratives that have been fed to you, from the emotional reactions that have been conditioned into you, from the belief that authority automatically equals truth. You must question every assumption, every belief, every instinct you have been taught to trust, and then you must do the hardest thing of all, stand alone in your thinking. Because the moment you start thinking for yourself, you will see how few people truly do. You will see how quickly people rush to defend their illusions, how violently they react when those illusions are threatened. You will see how much of the world is built on fragile, unquestioned stupidity, propped up only by the collective refusal to acknowledge it. And that is when the real challenge begins. Because resisting stupidity is not just about freeing yourself, it is about creating a new way of thinking. It is about breaking the cycle, challenging the system, forcing intelligence back into the conversation. It is about speaking the truth even when it is unpopular, even when it is mocked, even when it is punished. Because that is the only way anything ever changes. History is not shaped by the obedient. It is shaped by the ones who refuse, the ones who think when everyone else is blind, the ones who see through the lies when everyone else accepts them, the ones who fight, not with weapons, but with ideas. Because in the end, stupidity is only as powerful as the number of people who accept it. And the moment enough people choose intelligence over ignorance, the system begins to break. The greatest lie society has ever told is that intelligence is common sense, that rationality is the default state of human beings, that truth is self-evident. It isn't. Intelligence is rare, and truth is fragile. The natural state of most people is complacency, conformity, and intellectual laziness. That's why stupidity doesn't just exist, it dominates. It isn't something that occasionally appears in history. It is the default condition of civilization when left unchecked. And if we do not actively fight against it, if we do not deliberately build a culture that values intelligence over blind acceptance, then stupidity will always win. A society that values intelligence does not happen by accident. It does not simply emerge because people decide to be smart. It must be designed, cultivated, reinforced, and protected. Because stupidity is the easier path. It takes no effort. It rewards obedience. It provides comfort. But intelligence, real intelligence, requires discipline. It requires discomfort. It requires an active rejection of the easy answer in favor of the difficult truth. And that is why it is so rare. Look at the world today. Where is intelligence rewarded? Where is deep thinking encouraged? Schools condition students to memorize, not to analyze. Workplaces prioritize compliance over competence. Social media turns every conversation into a battleground of emotional reactions, rather than a space for critical discussion. In politics, the most effective leaders are not the ones with the best ideas, but the ones who can appeal to the lowest common denominator. Stupidity thrives because it is profitable, manageable, and predictable. Intelligence is inconvenient. It is disruptive. It demands change. And so, the system naturally selects against it. This is why breaking free from stupidity is not just about individual resistance. It is about creating an entirely new paradigm. It is about rejecting a world that punishes intelligence and building one where it is the standard. But that cannot happen unless people are willing to sacrifice the comfort of ignorance for the burden of understanding. Because intelligence is not simply about knowing facts. It is about the ability to question your own beliefs, to challenge your own biases, to hold conflicting ideas in your mind without retreating into blind certainty. And most people are not willing to do that. To build a culture that values intelligence, we must start by removing the fear of being wrong. Stupidity survives because people are afraid of admitting when they don't know something. They cling to ideas, not because they are true, but because they are familiar. They would rather defend a comfortable lie than face an uncomfortable truth. But intelligence is built on the opposite principle. It thrives on doubt. It demands constant reassessment, constant learning, constant humility. It does not seek the easy answer. It seeks the correct one, no matter how painful. And that is why true intelligence is so rare, because it requires ego death. It requires looking at yourself and realizing that you might have been wrong about everything. It requires destroying the illusion that you have it all figured out. And most people cannot handle that. They would rather sink deeper into stupidity than experience the discomfort of realizing how much they do not know. This is why stupidity is not just about ignorance. It is about identity. People do not just believe things. They attach their sense of self to those beliefs. They become their opinions, their ideologies, their political affiliations. And when you attack those beliefs, they do not respond with reason. They respond with emotion, with outrage, with blind defense. Because in their minds, you are not challenging an idea. You are attacking them personally. And this is why stupidity is so hard to uproot. Because it is not just intellectual, it is emotional. To build a culture that values intelligence, we must separate identity from belief. We must train people to detach their ego from their opinions, to see knowledge as something that evolves, not as something fixed. We must reward curiosity instead of certainty, humility instead of arrogance, questions instead of declarations. And most importantly, we must punish conformity instead of intelligence. Because right now, the world does the opposite. It celebrates those who follow the script and crushes those who challenge it. This is why intelligence is not just an individual responsibility, it is a collective fight. It requires people to stand against the tide, to speak when silence is easier, to think when obedience is rewarded. It requires a rejection of the systems that profit from stupidity, from the mindless entertainment that keeps people distracted, to the political machinery that thrives on division. Because as long as stupidity remains the cultural default, intelligence will remain the exception. And that is not a world worth living in. The question is, are you willing to fight for a better one? Most people will never wake up. That is the reality. They will live their entire lives convinced that they are thinking for themselves while mindlessly repeating the scripts handed to them. They will fight to defend illusions that were never their own, protect systems that do not serve them, and reject the truth, even when it is staring them in the face. Not because they are incapable of understanding, but because they refuse to see. Because seeing would mean change, and change is terrifying. Stupidity is not just a force that exists, it is a force that maintains itself. It does not simply affect individuals, it builds entire societies designed to protect it. It creates social norms that punish independent thought. It turns the truth into a dangerous thing, something that must be hidden, ridiculed, or destroyed. It conditions people to attack the ones who think for themselves, to see intelligence not as a virtue, but as a threat. And that is why most people will never escape it, because they do not want to. So what do you do with that knowledge? What do you do when you realize that stupidity is not just an individual failing, but a system, one that is woven into every aspect of the world around you? What do you do when you see how deeply it has infected your family, your friends, your colleagues, even yourself? Because the moment you recognize this, the moment you truly understand the scale of the problem, you will feel alone, more alone than you have ever felt before. But that is the price of waking up. It always has been. Every major shift in human history, every revolution, every movement that has ever challenged the status quo started with individuals who were willing to stand alone. People who could see through the illusion when no one else could. People who were mocked, ridiculed, cast out, until the world finally caught up with them, until the things they had been screaming for years became undeniable truths. But by then, most people had already forgotten who said them first. And that is the test. Can you keep thinking when the entire world wants you to stop? Can you keep questioning, even when it isolates you? Can you hold on to the truth, even when stupidity offers you comfort, community, and belonging? Because the system is built to wear you down, to exhaust you, to make you give up. It does not need to destroy intelligence. It just needs to make it so difficult that most people will choose the easier path. But you are already here. You are already asking questions that most people will never ask. You are already seeing through the game, even if you don't know all the rules yet. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you understand how stupidity works, you cannot fall back into it. You can only decide what to do with that knowledge. And here is the truth. You do not need to wake up the entire world. You do not need to save those who refuse to be saved. What you do need to do is become immune to the system that is designed to break you, to strengthen your mind against the forces that want you to surrender, to sharpen your thinking until no lie can take hold of you again. Because intelligence is not just something you have, it is something you protect. And if you do not guard it, if you do not actively defend it against the constant pull of stupidity, it will be taken from you, not in one dramatic moment, but in small, subtle compromises. In the little moments where you let things slide, where you stop questioning, where you decide that it is easier to just go along. But there is no going along. There is no escape from this. The moment you wake up, you are in the fight. And if you are in the fight, you might as well win. The world will not change itself. Stupidity will not disappear on its own. It will not collapse under the weight of its own contradictions, and it will not be defeated by time. If history has shown anything, it is that stupidity is not just persistent. It is aggressive. It does not simply exist. It expands. It defends itself. It destroys anything that threatens it. And unless enough people fight back, it will continue to shape the world, turning intelligence into a relic of the past. You have already seen it happening. You have watched as stupidity has overtaken institutions, infected conversations, and built entire belief systems that reward ignorance. You have seen how people no longer engage with ideas but react to them instantly, emotionally, without thought. You have seen how intelligence is mocked, how those who question are treated as enemies, how truth is not debated but erased. And yet, most people will never see this for what it is, because they don't want to. They will cling to their illusions, not because they make sense, but because they are easier to live with. They will defend their ignorance, not because it serves them, but because the alternative, admitting they were wrong, is unbearable, and they will fight, not to discover the truth, but to protect their own mental comfort. This is why stupidity will always be more dangerous than evil, because evil can be identified, it can be confronted, it can be resisted. But stupidity? Stupidity hides itself. It convinces people that they are thinking when they are simply repeating. It makes people believe they are informed when they are simply conditioned. It gives them the illusion of knowledge, the illusion of choice, the illusion of control. And that is why it spreads so easily, because most people never even realize they have been infected. But if you are still here, if you are still questioning, then you are already different. You are already on the outside, looking in. You are already resisting, even if you have not yet taken action. Because the first step to breaking free from stupidity is seeing it. And once you see it, you can never go back. You can never unknow what you know. You can never fall asleep again. And that is why intelligence is more than just a personal journey. It is a responsibility. It is a fight, not just for yourself, but for the people who still have a chance to wake up, for the ones who are still caught in the illusion, but who deep down know something is wrong, the ones who can feel that the world does not make sense, but do not yet understand why. Because the truth is, most people are not beyond saving. They are just waiting for permission to think. But they will not receive that permission from the system. They will not be encouraged to question by those in power. The world will not hand them the tools to break free. That must come from somewhere else, from someone else. And maybe that someone is you. Maybe you are the person who asks the question no one else is willing to ask. Maybe you are the one who refuses to go along with the narrative when everyone else is afraid. Maybe you are the one who starts the conversation that leads someone else to wake up. And that is how things begin to change. Not with massive revolutions, not with sudden shifts, but with small moments of defiance, with simple acts of critical thinking, with people who, one by one, reject stupidity and choose intelligence. But if you choose that path, understand this: it will not be easy. You will be resisted. You will be ridiculed. You will lose people. You will watch as those around you cling even harder to their illusions, not because they are true, but because they are afraid to let them go. And you must decide whether you will stand your ground, whether you will keep thinking even when the world tells you not to, whether you will hold on to your mind when everything around you is trying to take it from you. Because in the end, that is what this comes down to. A choice. You can stay silent. You can go back to pretending. You can convince yourself that it doesn't matter, that it's too late, that the world is too far gone. Or you can decide that intelligence is worth defending, that truth is worth protecting, that you will not be part of the machine. The choice is yours. If you have made it this far, then you already know what you need to do.